Hey everyone, I hope you're well playing and making the games that you all love. You're joining me, your host, Senior LD Max Pears, but not just me. We have an incredible guest joining us today, Mr. Senior LD Jack Chapman. How are we doing, sir?
Yo, not bad, mate. Not bad. How are you?
All good, mate. All good. Thank you very much for joining me on the show today as well. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation and super happy to be here.
Wow, I'm glad to have you, mate. It's going to be a fun one for us today. Do you mind then giving a bit of a brief breakdown of yourself and your career before we kind of jump into the main topics, man? But first, a quick word from today's sponsor. For those of you who do not know, I've actually teamed up with CGMA, one of the best courses to learn about level design, and I'll be teaching this. Not only will you get to receive feedback from myself, but you'll have incredible lectures by Amelia Schatz. If you don't know, is one of the lead level designers over at Naughty Dog. I've mentioned this course to you many of times because I took this back in 2019. So to be able to actually help and teach this course is a great honor for me, but also a great opportunity for many of you. This course is starting, or I should say this term is starting, in July. So if you want to sign up now, there'll be a link down in the description below. Sign up, you've got 10 weeks of incredible level design resources to help you, and this can help at any level, skill set, or range. So if you're looking to improve your level design skills, then join me this summer at the CGMA Level Design course. A link to this will be down in the description below.
Yeah, I'll try and to keep it super brief because I think I've mentioned this a ton of times to different people in different podcasts. So I don't want to sound like a bloody repeating record. But yeah, so I'm Jack. Currently a senior level designer at PlayStation London Studio. I've kind of been a different designer in my career, I guess. I've done a mixture of different things. So I've been like a generalist. Been like a cinematic designer. I've obviously been a level designer. I've had a bit of touch of combat design, but level design's kind of my bread and butter that I always kind of come back to, and it's the stuff that kind of excites the hell out of me, and it's the bit I have always gravitated towards as part of the process. So yeah, I've kind of did a whole different lot of level design, and I guess my kind of journey before that. Do you want me to go into that as well, or
Sure,
should...
mate, let's go
Yeah.
for it.
So obviously, I know everyone has their kind of own unique journey into the industry. And mine, like a lot of people nowadays, I guess, did start from an academic point of view. So I did it at college level before university. So I did 2 years of creative media development, sorry,
Mm.
at Darlington College, which is in my hometown in the northeast. And we did like a mixed bag of stuff there. So it wasn't just games; it was like,
Mm.
like kind of film study stuff. It was like animation, 3D modeling, like stop motion. So kind of all the stuff that if you're like a movie nerd or like animation, comic, whatever, you're gonna have a good time on it. So I did that for 2 years, and then I went to Teesside Uni, which you went to as well, I believe.
I was going to say, I keep forgetting that we go into the
Yeah,
same university,
yeah.
mate.
Which honestly, like, the more people I tend to go to kind of meet in different studios, I always seem to stem back to there's a weird Teesside Uni connection.
Yeah.
It's very strange, but cool, I guess. Yeah, and I did the games course there. Um, and I also did a year of graphic design there,
Mm.
but did end up going back to the games course. So I kind of had like 4 years at university rather than three. But yeah, I finished, when was that now? It was 2016. And then I kind of went straight into the industry in a QA position
Mm-hmm.
at TT Games. I was there for about, I think it was about 3-4 months. And then I managed to kind of secure, it was like a junior designer, like secondment.
Okay.
So I kind of got moved into design from there, and I was there for about, I don't know how, maybe like 6 months, I think, before I got like made like officially junior designer out of that secondment.
Mm-hmm.
Worked on a bunch of different stuff there, primarily Lego Worlds, which was like I guess like a slight Minecraft competitor. It was very very small team. It never really had the kind of like huge budget or anything behind it. But it was a really like important experience, I think, for me because it was obviously my first like professional game experience, but it was
Yeah.
also like a small project, small team. So like it was like game industry 101, but on roids, because you had to learn everything even more than you do was coming as a junior, because normally you're
Yeah.
at least on a bigger team. So it was a bit chaotic, but at the same time, like it kind of gave me a lot of really useful like industry know-how that I think would probably have taken longer to kind of grasp and understand.
Mm.
So I'm kind of weirdly thankful for all of like the kind of like trials and tribulations with it as well. But yeah, I was there through maybe I think it was about 2 years, something like that, maybe a little bit less. And then I went to Supermassive down in Guildford in the UK. Was like a cinematic designer mostly there,
Mm.
which we were kind of talking about this, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point. But
Yeah.
you'll kind of find out that kind of titles and roles can differ a lot at studios. But I'm sure
For
we'll
sure.
kind of we'll kick that subject up in a bit. And then yeah, I went back to TT after Supermassive to work on Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga, which obviously was a huge ambitious project for that studio.
For sure.
Joined as a level designer actually primarily for that, but did a bunch of different stuff from combat design to kind of gameplay design, kind of looking at mechanics, game feel, like kind of 3C stuff. So it's kind of spinning a lot of plates on that project, but kind of, like I said before, with my first industry job, I was kind of used to, I think it's kind of conditioned me to like to be busy and like having a lot of things to
Mm.
turn to if there's opportunity there to do it. So yeah, it was awesome to go and do that. Obviously, kind of big Star Wars fan, so it was awesome to kind of work on something of that scale.
God,
As
yeah, I
yeah, as
bet.
a huge celebration of Star Wars, it was awesome. Yeah, and then I kind of moved into R&D position within the studio. I think it was about August. I think it was during lockdown, so I think it was like August 2020 that would have been.
Mm.
As like an R&D designer, so that was probably one of my favorite times I've been in the industry, because R&D is all about finding the fun and like failing quick. So to
Yeah.
me, that's like how normally you come up, like you kind of stumble like upon greatness in games. And we tried a lot of different stuff, and my job for that was sometimes literally just doing pitches, doing a prototype in like a day or a week, and binning it because it either wasn't working or we didn't like where it was going.
Mm.
But yeah, on there, I was kind of heading up with a few others, a prototype there that we developed for a while. Sadly, it'll never see the light of day. But yeah, that was awesome to kind of work with, people who've been in the industry for like 20 years, people who've been in the industry for like 3 years. Huge, really, really diverse kind of cast of characters on the R&D team.
Mm.
And yeah, honestly, it's probably like some of my favorite time as a designer, but I guess it's in the industry as a whole. Yeah, and then that probably brings me up to the kind of year after. So I left TT and I went to Sumo um, as a senior designer there. It was a bit of a short-lived experience, to be honest. There
Mm.
was a kind of a lot going on in my personal life at the time, which I will not bore your listeners with.
Yeah.
But yeah, for kind of one reason or the other, it wasn't kind of working out for my kind of current stage of life I was in.
Mm.
So yeah, I kind of took a bit of time away from kind of working from that, and then I managed to land a job at Sony, which is where I am now. So I've been there since I think it was like February 2022. So yeah, it's coming up to maybe like 9-10 months now.
Brilliant.
Which it's absolutely flown, if I'm being honest. I don't know where this year's gone. I know everyone's saying that at the
Yeah.
minute, and I feel like a bit of a meme just for saying it, but it's absolutely flown. But yeah, having stacks of fun over there. Yeah, that's the really abridged version of the story so far, I guess.
Fantastic, man. No, it seems like you've done a lot and tried on many different hats and roles throughout your career as well. And I think that, as you mentioned earlier in your breakdown, that kind of an element to talk about how each kind of studio has different definitions for kind of level and design roles as a
Yeah,
whole.
yeah, it is. It is. It's super interesting because I think, I mean, I think if you're on like social media or like LinkedIn or Twitter or something now, I think it's
Mm.
those platforms. They can be a bit like toxic occasionally and what have you. But I think they are good platforms fundamentally for kind of outreach and
Yeah.
kind of like lowering like or like demystifying like the veil of like the game industry a little bit, because there's nothing really stopping you being able to find a seat like like a level designer that you really like and DMing them. Like
Oh,
doesn't
for
you
sure.
know what I mean? Like obviously if you be polite and don't be horrible, but like there's nothing really stopping you doing that. And I think that's kind of wonderful in a way.
Oh,
And
for
something
sure. And
I'm
also
kind of
seeing how they work as well. I
yeah,
think.
of course, yeah. So I think what is really interesting about that is you'll get whether it's like junior designers or students or even just people who just they're like they're making levels in their spare time, but they don't call themselves like level designers yet. They're just
Mm.
aspiring level designers, which I think is a bit problematic. I think if you're making levels and you enjoy making levels, like you're a level designer. It doesn't matter if you're not
Sure.
getting paid for it. Like if you're doing that and you enjoy it, you're a level designer. But yeah, I think the fact that those people can like DM you or whatever, and then the thing I'm noticing is no one knows what they should be doing as a level designer to improve their ability or be like, oh, how do I get a job like as a level designer? Like, what should I be doing? And
Mm.
I think that's really interesting kind of on your point, because so many studios that role differs like wildly. Like, there's some studios where as a level designer, like all you'll do is just build geo. And like you'll just build the space,
Yeah.
and it's like cool. Like you just you're making a level, you're designing a level, and that's awesome. Then there's some studios where you're just designing the level on like pen and paper, top down. You're doing like the kind of level design documentation. You're
Yeah.
calling all this stuff out, and you're being the kind of like the kind of like stakeholder of that kind of product almost, and then you're working with other disciplines to bring that to life. And you won't, you'll hardly do like actual any engine work. And then there's other studios where you're doing like absolutely everything. You're doing like all the documentation, you're doing all the block out, and you're doing all the scripting, and you're doing all of this stuff as well. Like pretty much everything other than like putting the environment art and the audio and stuff in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is a hard one to kind of say to these people like, oh, what should you be doing? Like, because it's like you said, there's no like correct blueprint to becoming a level designer. So I think what I've started doing now is it's like try and have a conversation with like where do you want to work, like what type of games you want to work on,
Mm.
and trying to gear yourself towards that. So like like if you're dying to work at I don't know, like Arcane for example, like start building like Dishonored levels, like start building that out, and then if you want to get to Arcane, if you keep getting like shit hot up making these immersive sim type maps, like if you keep going to that door to them, like I'm sure at one point or another, like that's gonna happen for you. But I just like even I like that's where I'm at currently now with my thinking. But then I don't even know if that's correct anymore, because it's do you know what I mean? Like it's so hard to feel like you are giving the correct recommendation to people sometimes, because it's the industry is changing so much like at a pace now, and the more I speak to people, it does feel like that role it can be anything now. But I don't know, like to me, as long as you're practicing like your core level design skills, and whether that is just you're getting very good at blocking out and understanding like what goes into making a good level, like I think those principles should still be like your main priority. But I think if you are interested in a certain studio or a certain game franchise or whatever, to me, like put your passion into your craft, and the kind of results should end up speaking for themselves almost. And with that as well, you're going to have a wealth of kind of reference to pull from. Like if you really want to make like Naughty Dog levels, like you've got a bunch of games you can sit and
Mm.
play and kind of research and kind of go over and kind of dissect why they're good and why they work, and then try and replicate that with your own work and put your own twist on it and stuff. Um, but yeah, it's super odd.
It is, mate, and I agree with you. I think sometimes people go because when you say design, right, that's such a broad
Yeah.
term, right?
Mhm.
That is such a broad thing, And depending, not even in our industry alone, that means something different in multiple different industries.
Hmm.
So I see a lot of people who tend to try and make their own game and then a level in their own game.
Hmm.
And I'm more in the mindset of you where if you like a certain thing or if you're looking to build in a certain way, build it in a pre-existing world just because it saves time on explanation.
Yeah.
You have to remember it's not on us as level designers to, well, I mean, let me rephrase that. It's not always on us to make the mechanics.
Hmm.
Sometimes you
Yeah.
might fall into that, sometimes you
Hmm.
might not. But prototyping for sure is something that people should
Yeah.
mess around with in scripting, whether that be blueprints, Playmaker, or whatever
Hmm.
people use. But I think definitely having it where you're blocking it in a pre-existing space will just one save you a lot of time
Yeah.
to allow you to understand, like you mentioned about if you want to do a Naughty Dog game, you can play a lot and instantly break down, okay, well, this is what makes a great Naughty Dog level, or
Hmm.
these they all have these components in them, or something like that, right?
Hmm.
And that can instantly just help you make something more in tune with it versus discovering, like you mentioned about being on an R&D team in part of your career. That's a whole other thing that happens in games that people don't realize.
Yeah.
There is so much that goes into
Oh,
failing.
oh, mate,
Oh,
like totally. I think the biggest thing, and I guess you did kind of see this, and it was quite nice that it led into Blocktober. But there
mm,
was the whole thing with the GTA 6 leak, right? And then you
yes.
had this big like kind of outcry from like gamers who obviously have never watched like a behind the scenes thing or seen any like work in progress game stuff, and they was just kind of like I I don't want to call it like an uproar, but I guess there was, and it was like, oh my god, like
Sure.
this game looks so unfinished. And it's like, yeah, it is unfinished. And
That's it.
there was that like really like infamous tweet that went around, and it was like, if you knew anything about game development, you'll know that like developers always make the graphics first, and whether or not this guy was trolling or not, like it led to some really good responses from like people in the industry, and
Yeah.
people decided like chucking out like there was like here's what Control looked like for like most of its
Yeah.
development. Like here's an entire like Uncharted 3 set piece where it looked like for most of the development. Like here's there, and it was like yes, like this is how most games look, and it was super nice to see like do like kind of what I mentioned before about that kind of like veil being a bit demystified a bit. Like
For sure.
I think when you start peeking behind the curtain and you're seeing how the sausage is made, like whatever analogy fits best there, um, to me, like it's nothing but a good thing because it's going to make more people go, "Oh shit!" Like this isn't like this Mount Everest of a,
Yeah.
of a thing. Like it's good to see that even the best games in the world like look like shit for a lot of their development, and it takes a lot of time to get there. Like they aren't done overnight games. Like there's reasons they take years to do. But yeah, I, I think it's also important. Like we're kind of we're kind of saying that if you can make a project like what's in the kind of realm of an existing thing, it's going to do a lot of that kind of heavy work for you.
Yeah.
Because like okay, like I understand what you're going for. You can base like your cameras on it. You can maybe prototype some basic movement and like gameplay mechanics and kind of echo it. But I think another thing is, and I can't speak to this too much because I've had very little modding experience. But I know modding is a great place for that because it
Yeah.
literally, if you can get into a game you love, so like to take for example like Hammer. So if you're like into Half Life and you want to get into like modding that game and using its engine, like everything that's in Half Life is just there ready to go. So if you just want to create your own map, like you can drop all the enemies in, all the weapons, and you can just start doing that, and that's going to save you. Like yes, you're going to have to learn how Hammer works and how blocking out works in that engine, but you're going to save a lot of time in the long run because you're not going to have to develop like any kind of gameplay. That's all there out of the box, ready to go, and you can just literally focus on the kind of like layout, the actual building of the geo, and then maybe a
Yeah.
bit of scripting. So yeah, like I think it's super important that when you can get easy wins, like take them and like double down on the shit that you want to get good at, because ultimately, like yes, you could be a jack of all trades and you could be great at everything, and some people are, and some people are amazing at being shit hot at like 5 different things.
Yeah.
But realistically, going back to what I said at the start, like if you are a student who's trying to get into the industry or whatever, get good at that one thing first. That's going to like get some like attention on your work, and then kind of nail that down. And I think that will be a good start to kind of get the kind of ball rolling and get some momentum. Kind of like first, those first difficult times when you are trying to break into that industry, I guess.
Yeah, I agree, mate. And there is a lot of stuff out there for you to use, obviously with Unreal, Unity, and probably more that you mentioned with Source and others
Hmm.
that I'm not even aware of.
Hmm.
And taking your understanding that iterating when we talked about like the mist of the veil being lifted up.
Hmm.
Man, people don't understand, or I don't think maybe we're not good enough at talking about it as an industry, not just you and I, but
Hmm.
iteration is so
Yeah,
important.
yeah,
It is never a one and done
no way,
thing.
no.
I think I've only seen that happen once in my career. It wasn't by me; it was someone else, and you
Yeah,
know,
but like
it just
that,
happened.
but yeah, like, that's what's interesting about that is, I think this is kind of maybe the point I was supposed to make one with my last answer, but I forgot. Is that is so important with the iteration point of view, but
Mm,
also when you're making a game, especially like R&D, but I guess any game in general, when you're building something, especially a new IP or like a new sequel where the new gameplay hasn't been finalized yet, you're kind of flying like semi blind, like not fully,
mm,
because like you've got bits of gameplay in and you can move around, you've whatever, but like you don't know that this thing is exactly how it's going to be, and you're like kind of hoping and praying that whatever people you are working with on a, like you said, on like an R&D project, when it's going to be a lot quicker, that
yeah,
you're going to make those decisions on the fly, and it's going to be okay, like we're doing this isn't this, or like, even like a game jam. And I think that's when you start to see like really interesting ideas, when like you have to commit and you can't be like, okay, it's this for now until we kind of find the fun. Because in like a game jam or R&D, you've got to go quite quick. We need to like, what is the vibe, what is the control, like whatever, and then you can start building levels and environments for that. When in like a more traditional project, like sometimes you don't know like all the answers, and that stuff can take time to come online. And you, as level designers, we can't do our best meaningful work until we have all the ingredients.
yeah,
And I do think that's something that isn't sometimes fully kind of explained to people outside the industry. I think they go, "Oh, it's a new game, like everything's like agreed upon," and then you make levels, and it's like, "Oh, I wish."
Yeah, right. It would be great to have your full mechanic set before you made
Yeah,
it, but no,
yeah,
that doesn't. It's
yeah,
very rare that happens, shall we
yeah.
say?
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I think it is a an important one for people to understand, as you said, like how important iteration and
Hmm.
sticking with those choices as well, right? Because sometimes you'll find that people, what ruins sometimes is someone's not willing to make a choice, and that
Hmm.
can just destroy something as well. And there's sometimes there is validity in waiting and seeing, as you said, but sometimes you've got to just pull the trigger and
Hmm.
see what direction it goes. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just part of it.
yeah, totally. And I think that's yeah, it is part of the process of being like a good level designer, and I guess just a good like developer or designer as well. Is you know everyone in development. There's so many people, like talented people, putting their own thing into this Frankenstein's monster that you're
Mm,
building together. So everyone's protective over their body part of this thing.
yeah,
So like as level designers, you're sat there and in your head going, "This is going to be the coolest level ever," and like I'll protect it till I die. But at the same time, like you've got to contend with environment art who all they want to do is make your shit look amazing, and
yeah,
they want to show their stuff off. And now and then you'll hit certain bits when they'll be like, "Oh, it'd be cool if we did this as well," or "Oh, we should do this," and that can either infringe on what they want to do or what you want to do. And then there's things there you have to kind of learn to kind of communicate and kind of compromise where you can.
yeah,
And yet again, like that's not something people outside of the industry ever understand, and it's something obviously you don't really understand until you experience it like firsthand, or you kind of see it at play. Um, that it isn't always this like great thing that we're super talented and we nail it first go, and then we pass it along and it gets done and it comes back and everyone's it's sound first go, and it's just easy kind of easy ride. Like it is a lot of iteration, it's a lot of back and forth, and
yeah,
sometimes you can build something and it can look amazing and it can a pen and paper, it feels like it should be great, but you get people in who aren't too close to it, and they'll play it and like this isn't fun, and
yeah,
it's like, oh crap, and you do feel like you kind of have that awful, imposter syndrome kind of kicking in, like, oh shit, I'm rubbish at this job. But you're not. You just were in a certain area at the time, and even the project you're working on might have been in a certain place at the time when that was the correct thing to do, but now it's not, and you've got to kind of stay fast on your feet and be flexible. And I think that's like the important lesson, like to always be aware, like level designers can't do, like that. Our job is to take everything that every other person's doing for the game, and our job is to showcase that in the best way possible. Like we're making whatever gameplay have like cooked up, we're building like the kind of like stage to show all that cool shit off, and that's the same for like audio and everything. And I think that sometimes doesn't get talked about as our job. Like I said, we said at the start, when this role can be so many different things at so many different studios, but I think that is the fundamental like common thing between it, and that's how it should be viewed, at least in my opinion anyway.
No, I agree with you, mate. I agree with you. I think it's a team effort.
Yeah,
but as a team effort, it doesn't mean that it's smooth sailing. And
no.
Us as a team, as you said, like our role is a collaborative one, and we have to keep our egos in check, as everyone does as well.
Yeah,
but making sure that we put the game first. And I think you're spot on with it, mate. You're spot on. I guess with the next topic on that one, mate, we obviously have that of the when people have started to make their work is making portfolios and stuff. And I was just wondering, because I've seen that you've recently revamped yours and it looks very sexy, mate. What is it that you think helps make a good portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen like a lot of great portfolios out there, and I think like I think the one downsides to mine, which I know I do want to address with it, is like I do want to put more kind of process stuff in there, because I think a lot of mine is like a lot of like finished product stuff, and there isn't a lot of like top downs and iteration-y stuff, which is a shame, because literally everything we've just been speaking about there is the bulk of your work as a level designer.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it is a shame that a lot of the time it is just like the final thing that players see, because really like level design is a bit of an invisible art in a way. Do you know what I mean?
We're the ugly cousin of it.
That sounds
awful. I don't mean it in an awful manner.
No, it's so true though. So like I think like that is one thing I want to improve on mine, is to get more like work in progress bits behind the final thing, which I probably will try and do with some of my personal projects, because it'd be a lot easier. So we'll do that in time. But to answer your question, I think to me it's I think there's a definite thing from, I don't know if it's the case of people who are obviously hungry to get into the industry, but I think sometimes there's the temptation to do a lot of stuff and put it all on.
Yeah.
And you end up having this portfolio where there's like 10 like LD pieces, and maybe in that 10, like half of them, maybe more than half, are like good, but the other ones are a bit subpar. And the unfortunate thing is, like, I don't know if it's just like a human psychology thing or not, but like we tend to remember the bad stuff, and it's like you end up getting judged by your worst piece of work, and that sucks. I'm not saying that's the way it should be, but like that is the way it tends to be. So if you've got like, even if you've got 9 amazing levels on there and one of them's poor, like you'll probably tend to remember the bad one, and that sucks. So I definitely say like put quality over quantity every time. If you've got 2 great levels, put 2 great levels on. Like don't put 10 on, because if you're not proud of all 10, like why are you putting it on? Is it just to kind of like fluff your portfolio? Like try to avoid that. But yeah, like to me, like I don't know, like I guess it kind of goes back to what we said at the start. Like to me, like put on there what you're passionate about, because if you're passionate about those works, like they'll be good. Like if you really want to sit in it, like Last of Us levels or Dishonored levels and stuff, and you're putting a lot of time into them, like be proud of it and like showcase it on there and talk about it and like break down like why you made certain decisions and stuff. And I think just like the more you can show off it as well, like kind of what I said before, like if you can show those decisions you made and show those like iterations as well, I think that's a really underrated part of portfolio stuff from a level designer point of view. Because I think I think the way most portfolios work is you can kind of show your initial like top down, and then how you built it, and it's like cool. Like I can see that top down turned into 3D, awesome. Where kind of what we were saying before, like in development, like that's very rarely the case that that top down makes it to the final product looking like that.
Yeah.
So I don't really know like the 100% answer to me, but I think like if you can show like that kind of process of where you started and how it like like, how it like kind of how it started and here it is now. If you can somehow illustrate that, I think that's always going to get my attention because I think like that's my favorite bit of like game development for me. Obviously, it's very biased as level designer, but I love seeing like the basic idea, whether it's a mechanic, level, whatever. Does that basic initial first pass and seeing it like each iteration, like drip feeding in and seeing it improve, like because you don't see it when you're that close to it, but when you start looking back, it's like, oh my god, like we've came so far.
Yeah, mate. I
Yeah.
agree.
But yeah, I mean, like, I guess it's probably more like at least in my thinking, like I think portfolios once you've got like some release titles under your head, I think most portfolios tend to go like a bit of a similar route that you just tend to kind of break down which levels you worked on and put like some kind of gameplay of people playing it and all that stuff. And I think that's awesome. But yeah, I think for people who are trying to, like you said, trying to break in industry or land that first job, yeah, like don't be tempted to put like everything on unless you've got like 10 absolutely bangers. But that's very rarely is the case. But to me, yeah, like just make sure you're showcasing like the best stuff. Like put your quality up there, and stand by it as well. Like put it in there. Like go you kind of if you can break down why you made those decisions, why you're doing this, and all that kind of good stuff. And as well, like for any students out there who might be kind of struggling to showcase their work, if you can make it look like your uni module stuff that another like 200 people in your year have on their portfolios as well, try and dress it up in a way that makes it look something other than just a uni module. Because the
Yeah.
unfortunate thing is, and no one wants to say it, but when you're on these uni courses and you're all finishing at the same time and you're all making portfolios and you've all got the same uni module on,
Yep.
it does start to all look a bit samey. So if you can find any way to make those modules look a bit like an actual like title in some form and make it look like it's just a little bit above the rest, purely just in its presentation, how you dress it up on your portfolio. I think that'll help just kind of push it to the kind of next step. It'll help you stand out amongst those like because it's literally hundreds of people you're against just from like an academic point of view now, like just from one
Oh
uni.
yeah.
And when you compare all the unis and higher education things are doing game stuff now, like that's a lot of competition just there alone.
Yep.
So just any way you can you can make yourself just pop that little bit extra. Definitely take those steps to do that.
At Level Design Lobby, we believe everybody has a story to tell. Hobbyist or student, freelancer or veteran, we made it our mission to unite those who share our passion for creating and developing great games. Thanks to our generous Patreon backers, we've been able to do just that. So if you've already pledged your support, thank you. If not, you too can ensure the future of Level Design Lobby, helping us to create even more exciting content, collaborations, interviews, and much more. With awesome perks and rewards, whether you're a seasoned professional or just getting started, you're sure to find something for you. Want to share tips, tricks, and advice with passionate, like-minded developers? Our awesome community Discord has you covered. Fancy practicing your level design, creating strong portfolio content, and having fun? Then try our level design weekends. Or perhaps you want to individually discuss your work, hone your skills, or level up your career? Then consider our one-on-one mentorships. If you share our vision, then go to patreon.com/leveldesignlobby for more information and to pledge your support. Thank you.
No, I completely agree. I always say to people, it's not always the best level that gets someone a job. It's the process behind the level. People want to, because there's a conversation starter as well. When people are, oh, I saw you did this, but it changed if you do it through a GIF or one of those sliders.
Yes, I love those sliders. Yeah.
Yeah, people, because the conversation, oh, well, I see it change. What made you do that? And it's a great conversational piece for it. I think the funny thing is when you get into the industry as well, make sure you're taking as much screenshots as you can, because there is so many projects I look back on, I'm like, fuck sake, like if I would have just been able to get something a little bit more here, blah blah blah, could have used that for the portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's something that I'm seeing a lot of on like student projects, to be honest, at the minute, which is really cool. Like you are seeing students remember to kind of set cameras up on Unreal and kind of
Yeah.
keep them in that project all the time. So they're cutting these really cool videos together when it's like a fly through and it's jumping between like, day 1 block mesh to like day 30. And it's really nice to see people adopting that, because like you said, it's a great presentation, like kind of conversation piece of like, oh shit, like, oh, I've noticed those barriers changed there. Like, why did you change that? I'm like, oh, cool. And you can start, mentally taking notes before you've even like talked to the person's work,
Yeah, mate.
which is
And
really cool.
I
But
think
yeah,
it's funny now, like when I looked at, well, if I was able to look at my portfolio, what it was when I finished uni versus how students are looking now, I'm like, God, I wouldn't have stood a goddamn chance. Like some of the portfolios are looking really, really incredible. Like what people are doing.
there's some great stuff out there. I mean, it's not directly to do with portfolio, I guess. But it's somewhat adjacent. But even what I said before about like LinkedIn and Twitter, like if you can get your work on there and within like certain level design circles, and like you said, if you just do some GIFs or you do those cool slider stuff, like people go wild for that in this community, and like people love to see it. And I don't just mean like just students and kind of amateur level designers. I mean like people who high up in like the people who are like level design directors and stuff. I see people getting retweeted all the time, and that. And I think sometimes like it's a nice way that work can get into someone's vision without you even trying to sometimes.
For sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like the fact that Twitter allows you to essentially broadcast your work to people's eyes, where that would usually take like hoping on a bloody lucky star that your portfolio lands on the top of a pile.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that's an insane tool that we kind of have as a not as like a direct way to get hired, obviously, but just a way to broadcast your work and get some eyes on it, which might lead to a follow on your Twitter account or a click on your portfolio, which then might lead to someone. Oh, we'll save that when we're hiring again. Like we can reach out to that. I think that's awesome. I think as well, something that I have spoken about in the past. I can't remember if it was maybe on one of our podcasts or not. Maybe it was someone else's, but something that was really helpful for me during the pandemic was there was a lot of senior designers at really great studios who obviously recognized that the world was very shit at that point in time, and there wasn't a lot of joy to kind of go around, and people were just like offering like portfolio reviews and like one-on-one time, and being like, if anyone wants a chat about career or what you should do next, or just like level design tips or anything like that, like just drop me a DM. And like I did it with someone who was at Santa Monica at the time.
Amazing.
And I was like, I'll shoot my shot. Like, why not? Like they can only say no. Like that's kind of my kind of mindset. I kind of tend to operate in life in any way. But and like I ended up having like I think in the end, I think it was like 3 like 40-minute like one-on-one Zoom calls with them.
Oh wow!
And we talked about everything from like level design to like next steps in career to just like general what should I be doing now, because I feel like I'm at the stage where I need to kind of make some kind of decisions of where I want my career to go next. And honestly, like I'm not like kind of making this up or exaggerating. Like if I didn't have those conversations and those calls, I don't think I'd be in the position I am in now. Like it fundamentally changed my approach to, applying for jobs maybe I didn't think I was ready for, and kind of taking some risks, and just like you said, even just like reaching out to people that maybe I was a bit apprehensive about doing in the past. So yeah, like I mean, if you have the means to do that, and obviously have the correct etiquette about doing it, I'd always recommend doing it, because, like, you know, as long as you're being polite and it's coming from a good place, like, the only thing they can say is no, which is completely fair. But yeah, I think anything you can try and do to kind of forward your own development. I think why not?
Completely agree, mate. Like, that's another thing I think people don't understand is this is a job where you keep trying to learn and grow, because every project is so different. We talked about working in different studios,
Yes.
provides different like perspectives and challenges and opportunities, and the industry as a whole is a very welcoming one for the most part. You know, like there's some incredible people out there, and as you said, some people might say no, and they're probably not saying it to be rude. They're probably saying it because they're just busy, you know. And
Yeah. Well, that's it, isn't it? Sometimes, like, you know, it's fine me saying it, and I'm a certain way with social media, I guess. But some people have their social media and they don't want it to be like too much of like a, you know, like a public invitation for conversation, which is completely fine. But like I said, like, if you have a way of approaching it respectfully, you should definitely kind of, you know, just kind of use a bit of common sense, I guess, with that, and, you know, who knows where it could lead. I guess I can only kind of like speak of my own kind of experience of what's that kind of led for me more than anything. But I guess it was during COVID, and that was a different world.
Oh yeah, but I mean, there was Rika. I don't know if you've had the pleasure to speak with Rika Lim, who is now the lead LD over at, oh god, why am I forgetting the name? They're the ones that did Payday.
Starbreeze.
Yes,
No?
that's the
Yes,
one. Thank you very much. And she offered to do that, and even I was like, "Hey mate, do you mind just taking a look through mine?" And she gave me some solid feedback. Like, it's never done for us. Like, and we're both seniors and stuff. It doesn't mean there isn't more to learn, and that's always the important thing to keep in mind, is there's always more to learn. And man, I don't know if you've noticed it, but we talked about briefly there is you're seeing portfolios change. And not only that, CVs have changed from when I first started applying for jobs. Man, do I sound old saying that. There is a lot of change in that, and it's important to remind yourself, remember that, and to help grow and learn from that. There was an interesting tweet by one of the lead LDs at Naughty Dog. I'm sorry I forgot his name, but he essentially said he doesn't look at CVs unless there's a graphic design element to them. And yeah, that's a weird, and maybe I'm paraphrasing, I need to double check, but I know he'd mentioned about it, for him it was really important. And like my CV X years ago, I was like, God, that wouldn't be it. But it changed over the last couple of years. And again, like, graphic design is very different, as you know, mate, doing know a degree in it as well as game design. They are very different elements of design. But just seeing how they can develop, you know, it's quite interesting.
I mean, I haven't seen what you're kind of referring to, but I think what I would say the common thing between those two things is communication and how to most effectively communicate. So I think whether you're a level designer, and the best way you're going to get an idea across, even as a designer in general, in the industry, if you can effectively communicate your ideas in the most succinct way, like 9 out of 10 times, that's going to beat an idea that someone spent 2 days writing like a 30-page document about. You know what I mean? Like, so, like, I guess there is like I don't know if that's, I guess it is graphic design in a way, because you are taking a concept or an idea and you're distilling it down to its like most accessible format. So yeah, like I do kind of understand that. And I guess as well, like, it does, there's like, I don't know, like it's almost like a formality thing, I guess, as well. Like, it's like if you've got like a well-dressed CV, it probably is going to say a little more about like how you present your work in general as well. Because it's kind of, it's almost like a first greeting, like, digitally, of someone, or at least it was at one point. But yeah, I saw a big thread on, was it Twitter? I think it was LinkedIn, actually. And it was like this huge like resume, and it was like 4 pages long, and it had like every experience this person had from like when they were like 14 doing a paper round or something. Like, you know, it was like fair play to him, it was detailed. But
Respect to all those past paper boys and
yeah,
girls out there.
yeah,
You know,
man,
we all
100%.
started there,
Yeah,
man. We
you
all started.
absolutely got to know your roots. But like, it was like an Argos catalog. Like, it was
Yeah.
huge, and it was like, okay, but if I need to like turn a CV over, even if it's a PDF, I have to flick through it like 3 clicks to see it all, compared to someone who's just got this like very succinct, what you see is what you get, like bullet pointed experience, you know, wall on one page, looking super tight. Like, yeah, like fundamentally, I know what I'm picking just from a pure visual standpoint. So like, there
Mm.
is something in that, I guess.
I think it's a way of also like showing it, right? Like you're saying, it's not just, it's how can you communicate. Like one of the things, and this is really nerdy, so forgive me. One of the things that I really liked when I revamped my CV is my
Mhm.
hobbies are I use icons to display them instead of writing it down, so it's a
Okay,
little bit different.
nice.
Same with like my experience. There's kind of like these nice designs next to them to show the timeline, so it breaks it up slightly than just another like wall of text or bullet point, right?
Okay.
And I think there's some those that like you said, right? It's like how can I communicate that in
Hmm.
the same way but slightly different, right? Whether that's
Yeah.
the passing of time, as I mentioned, or hobbies. Instead of writing gym, I can just use an icon of a dumbbell. But
Yeah.
it's also interesting how different countries use it, because I have a friend out in Norway and his is like an Argos catalog as well. I
Right.
showed
Okay.
him,
Okay.
and his is like 6 pages long. And I said to him, I was
Wow.
like, "Why do you have it so long?" You
Hmm.
know, I was curious about it, and he was like, "Oh no, in Norway, like everyone really wants to know your full details." I was like, "What?" And then my missus is American, and she was saying to me, "Oh no, it's because mine was originally 2 pages," and she's like, "No, it should be one."
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, just different places, different spaces. You know, it's
Yeah,
an
it
interesting
is
one.
it is strange, isn't it? Because I think I mean, this isn't a game industry thing really, but like, I think as a culture and as as just a race, I think a lot of those things are kind of becoming a bit like homogenized, and
Yeah,
everything is kind of becoming almost in line and very streamlined together as like, this is the kind of like line now, and this is how
yeah,
you do these things that used to be kind of crazy, and there was like 19 ways of doing it. I think a lot there's like a air of standardization almost
yeah.
kind of
See,
through
that's
that.
why I wonder if it's a good or a bad thing. Like
Mm.
ArtStation did something really fascinating and really amazing for environment artists and concept artists portfolios, right? Because it put it in an area which everyone can see and kind
Mhm.
of unified and made it a lot much simpler than creating your own website. Which even
Yeah,
if you see an ad for Squarespace or whatever
yeah,
WordPress, it is still a challenge to learn
yeah, yeah,
those
yeah.
ones and create it, right? And I often wonder, because I've seen some LDs experiment with ArtStation as well,
Yeah. Hmm.
and I'm always like, man, it's cool to see like you mentioned unification,
Yeah,
but I feel like you lose a little bit of personality. But
I
again,
know what you mean.
I
Yeah.
don't know if that's just my
No,
biased
I
opinion
I
for
do I do get what you mean. It is weird because it is essentially like, ArtStation is essentially
Mm,
like environmentartistportfolio.com.
yeah,
Like, and that's cool. Like, I'm not shitting on that at all. Like I said, I think it's a good resource. It's a good site. But yeah, I think there definitely is that kind of air of, oh, like, I'm not getting like you as a kind of
yeah,
individual, or you as a creator, or you as a designer. Almost like, it does feel like I'm getting a peek into you as from your work point of view, but like, who are you as a kind of person, and whatnot. I mean, maybe like, that's too harsh, because I know you can still go in and you can have a bio and stuff on ArtStation, but yeah, I think because it is just like you're almost like flicking through it as a browse to find people, rather than like honing in on one person. Almost like, I don't think people go on
yeah,
ArtStation just to see one person. You like go on it to see like an art dump from a new game, and it's great
yeah,
for that, because like, oh cool, like, Naughty Dog just dropped all the Last of Us stuff, and you can like go through all their environment artists, and you can see all this cool stuff. Um, but yeah, you rarely see like environment artists that always direct to like a portfolio. It does always seem to be ArtStation. And
yeah,
like you said, like, there's a few designers I've seen who dabbled in ArtStation, but like, ultimately, they're to make it look like it's an ArtStation post, it ends up looking like an environment art post, if that makes sense,
mm,
because it's
yeah,
obviously always the final product from like a release game.
yeah.
So yeah, it's a weird one from a level design point of view. I think I'm not shitting on it at all. I think if
No,
you kind of do what you got to do to get your work out there, of course. But yeah, I think it's definitely like heavily weighted to environment art
for sure. And I don't. The thing is, as well, is I don't know what would be the right portfolio structure to unify for it anyway, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you were to make all LDs, right? Again, just ideas here, not what I'd do. But if you're like, okay, you have to have a GIF and a video and images. That's all. Okay, or just GIFs or something, right? Or just a slider. Like, cool. It makes it easier for everyone to read, but then it detracts from certain elements. As like I said, we've discussed already with different ways that people work, different projects working in different ways. To highlight that, because like I often think, how do you show off your scripting abilities on a portfolio?
This is literally what's came in my head when you were saying that, because people have asked me that in the past, and it's like even people just working on their own, like, you know, kind of fan projects or like indie projects and things like that. Like I've had someone who they're making they're building Nazi zombies from like scratch off their own back,
Right.
and they're sat there like, how do I best like show this? I'm like, dude, you're making Nazi zombies from scratch, like just show it all. If you're doing all of it, like just show it all. And you know, they seemed a bit kind of apprehensive about, yeah, but like I don't just want to feel like I'd like just showing off that I did all the reload animations or something. It's like, dude, you're rebuilding all from scratch. Like this is an insane project. Like just start kicking this out there and getting people on it. But yeah, I think in like a if you did all the scripting on like, you know, some kind of like AAA game, for example, where you didn't do any of the actual like level designy geo stuff, but
that's
you
what
did.
the Rockstar, I believe. Like you're not a level designer, your title's level scripter. If I
Yes, I've heard
correctly.
that. Yeah, I've heard that term a lot. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, like, surely the best way to show that is just show the final level in how it looks in game. Because you know, it's showing anything other than that is going to be like, okay, well, it's not the finished product, and it's not polished, and it's not got all the fancy graphics or everything. I guess you could just break it down, like just do a detailed, you know, maybe like you're playing the game, but you're like, you know, you do it in like After Effects or Premiere, and you're kind of pausing it and you're highlighting certain things that you did in the scripting. Maybe that's something you can kind of highlight, and you can really break it down about why each bit is happening and how you kind of accomplish that or something like that. But yeah, it's kind of like I said before, there is a bit of an invisible art to level design as a you know, as a discipline sometimes, because, you know, I've kind of said it kind of mates in the past, but I think even from like somebody who has no interest in building levels or, you know, wanting to make games, they just love games, like I don't think people can always recognize great level design, but I think anyone can recognize bad level design.
Yeah, I think that's half the reward of making such great level design is it's not all the time, but sometimes it's people not knowing, right? Like people not knowing where they're being led, but they follow the intended path, or people thinking, oh, like that jump was way too far, and it increases the tension because like, oh, I just made it, when you were always going to make it, you just had a special animation for it or something, right? Like, yeah,
100%. I mean, like, yeah, if there's anyone listening who hasn't already realized, like, games are just smoke and mirrors, like everything, like across the board. Like, anytime anything like that happens, like, there's been someone who has painstakingly put something in place to make it do that, which is awesome. But yeah, it is a funny one for sure. Just kind of on the actual point, like how you kind of show that off, because you would have to sit and break it down and really kind of start showing just how, like, you know, how much stuff is kind of in the background to make this thing look and play as like amazing as it is. And, you know, I think for me, the thing which, if I play a game nowadays with, you know, kind of all the industry experience and kind of knowing how the kind of sausage is made with games for the most part, there's still times when I can play a game and be like, fuck, how did they do that?
Yeah.
Like, that is insane. Like, I've been replaying God of War from 2018, like, recently. And, like, I've played, like, the first fight with the stranger, and the bit when all the environment starts like collapsing, when you're like proper like grabbing each other and it's like fragmented, like that still blows my mind how good that looks. And it's like, you know, in my head I can see the initial pass of that almost in my head of, you know, like an LD working with like the like level coder or something and putting a rough first iteration of that in, and there's just like maybe some blocks and a bit of like there's a bit of block mesh shifting about, but to go from that to where it ends up is like always a treat for me. So yeah, who knows, man? How to best to show that stuff off, other than maybe just being brutally transparent about like, yep, this is the level I did, like, and I'm going to do a walkthrough about how we accomplished this, what we did here, like what's actually triggering here. Even from like a combat point of view, I think it'd be quite interesting because like that's something I don't think a lot of people think about too often, like the nuance of like encounter design and like combat design, and you know, having enemies come in at the right time, like not kind of, you know, too much like cognitive load on the player. Like that's a real invisible art that you know there's not a lot of people do talk about that. And I think you've got to kind of really search for that stuff. And even like GDC, there's not a great deal on encounter design. There's quite a bit on combat design, but I don't think people talk about like actual encounter design too much outside of maybe like an MMO kind of standpoint. That for me still feels like quite a hidden part of the job, and that is something that is, you know, that is a job in itself. But sometimes that can just be part of your level design job, which is wild.
When we were working on Cyberpunk, we eventually had an encounters team that came about, but on Ubisoft, it was part of your design, and it's fascinating you mentioned that, because I think this is going to get me like hate if people disagree, but I was recently playing, let me pull it up, it was Tales of Arise, right? And it's not just Tales of Arise, I've seen a lot of JRPGs. But like when we were on Cyberpunk, we got such a drilling from our story team to just remind us, when you're doing your encounter design, make it feel like, and you know, I know people are going to pull up 1,000 Cyberpunk bugs here to try to prove me wrong, but we went through like a ton of when before the player gets there, because there's, you know, like there's a decision point normally, and then there's a, you know, a recon phase where before people go in guns blazing, they can assess what's happening.
Yeah,
and you really had to make it clear that people are actually doing stuff in there. So whether they were on a patrol, they had to have certain animations where they were, for example, repairing a truck. Okay, but if they're walking away somewhere, maybe they need to find a tool to repair that truck. So then you got to go find them looking through something, then talk to someone, or they take a phone call. And you had to like build up their own kind of mini story, which is just, again, a small section of an encounter design, because that's what they do before getting attacked. So you can learn to stealthily approach, because then if they go to each kind of animation point, there is like X devices you could use to distract or to take them out, right?
Right.
And, you know, when I see, and again, every place is different. This isn't me saying, well, we're better, because again, you can find 1,000 Cyberpunk memes out there to prove me wrong. But it is interesting because I was playing that, and the NPCs were just in one position and they weren't even moving. Like, it was fascinating though, because it made it look interesting, because it was one where there was like something being researched in this camp, this bandits camp you're in, and there was a clipboard next to them. They were looking at some bottles or canisters, and they had like a note in their hand. Now, again, if you just ran past it, you'd instantly connect in your head, okay, they're making notes on this. But as soon as you stopped, illusion shattered, because they weren't breathing, let alone moving. And again, each place will value that information differently. And this isn't me gunning for anyone, as I said, or anything like that. But it just shows you, you know, when you're talking about encounter design, we didn't do that necessarily on Division. We made sure there was patrol paths, because we thought about it from the encounter point, right? Like, so brace it in. But on that, it was there was the narrative side on top of that, which was a fascinating one to think about as well, and to make the world feel alive, as well as assessing the combat.
I think that's ultimately it, isn't it? I think it's you have got to kind of pick your battles for that, and I think ultimately you've got to kind of support like what's most important to your game. So something like Cyberpunk, when it's a big selling point of that game is that it's it's this kind of living, breathing cyberpunk RPG where the world feels alive and there's all this kind of cool stuff going on. Where certain games where you're kind of running in and the main thing is just getting into the next combat encounter, like no one's going to spend much resources on building up what are these enemies doing and like what's their names and why are they here and all this stuff, like because the player's going to kill them all by the time they've even asked those questions. So I think ultimately like it all depends of what is your kind of like games, like what is the player fantasy for your game.
For sure.
And that's how you need to kind of make those decisions to do that. And then I guess there's like the kind of mid-ground stuff of, you could look at something like Destiny, I guess, which is definitely more on the side of, I just need to shoot shit and I don't really care what these things are doing. But they're still going on patrols and maybe there's a little bit of like idle animations between them and they're in certain areas and it looks like they're doing stuff, or, maybe they're crawling about and moving from point A to point B. And that kind of sells you with that it isn't just like this pointless AI. It's like a living, breathing creature that's got its own kind of, Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever. But yeah, it is an interesting one to kind of pick that battle. But yeah, I think it all depends on just that kind of player fantasy and what you want. Because I think like if you look at the kind of Arkham games, like their entire setup for their encounters is all about kind of making those encounters not necessarily escalate, but kind of have a this kind of sense of escalation. With if you're in those predator modes and you're taking out guys, but you're doing it in a way that they're noticing they're getting taken out. It had that entire system where those NPCs would like go through different behaviors, and they'd start off cocky as anything, and then if you've done it and you've really started to like scare the shit out of them, like they're like. They're walking backwards. They're turning around every 2 seconds. Like they're shooting at things around the corner just as a preemptive strike. And yeah, I think it's all got to depend on that kind of player fantasy or what you want the player to be feeling, and if you need them to feel like really invested in the kind of world and narrative, or is it just a case of I just want to run through and like, hit shit?
Yeah, exactly. It's a fascinating one to figure that out and to
yes, totally.
To provide for it as well. That's each one has its own challenge.
Yeah, man.
Well,
totally.
mate, I've just seen the time, and I just want to not steal any more of yours. So thank you so much.
Oh, wow, is that an hour? Bloody hell, it's flown.
Yeah, right. So thank you so much for coming on the show, mate. I really appreciate it. And if people want to reach out to you, how can they do so?
So you can follow me on Twitter at Shaka Inc. I think it is. Might have an underscore in there. I'm sure you'll chuck it in the bio.
There'll be a link in the description.
Yeah. If you want to kind of align over there, anything to do with level design or just game stuff, it's probably the best way to reach me. If not, obviously, always up for connecting over LinkedIn and whatever's easiest for all of these. And kind of like I said in kind of early in the chat, if there is anyone out there who just wants to chat about level design, portfolio stuff, or what they should be doing next in their career, I'm not saying I'm the best person for it, but I know the wonders it's done for me and my personal development and my career. So if you need that, like I'm more than happy to have those conversations with you.
Fantastic. And if you want to reach out to me, you can do so as well on Twitter, which is at MaxPairs. Email into the show with any questions you may have, leveldesignlobby@gmail.com. And if you want to support the show to make sure that we can get more incredible guests, make it sound good, as well as maybe get some mentorship, we do have some mentorship spot open. Head over to patreon.com/leveldesignlobby.com. Thank you all very much. Take care, and we'll catch you all next time.